Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Policy Talks. Today we have Dr. Pramod Verma with us, and we are going to talk about DPGs, DPIs. For those of you who are not aware or have not heard the name Dr. Verma, he is very well known in the DPG and the technology circles at large. He is the technological brain behind Aadhar, and almost every DPG that is currently active in the country has some part of his technology or protocol embedded in them. He has been at the forefront of developing DPGs for healthcare, education, and there are several other in the pipeline. So we'll talk to him about them. And our idea today is basically to understand both the scope, expanse, and the impact of the work that he and his team has done over the last almost 16 odd years. So welcome to the show, Dr. Verma.
Thank you, Yatish. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been tracking some of your shows, and it's so wonderful that we can finally catch up.
Yes, thank you. Finally, we could catch up. So, Dr. Verma, first of all, for the uninitiated and the newcomer to this space, do define DPGs and DPIs for us.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a stab at it. Now, it's always hard for a technologist to explain things to common man, okay? Yeah. No, but I'll try. So let's talk about digital or public infrastructure in general. So DPI stands for Digital Public Infrastructure. Let's define public infrastructure. I think people are quite familiar with the public infrastructure such as highways, national highways, yes, railroads and airports, and we create this public infrastructure to bring the country together, improve commerce, create opportunities, economic opportunities for people, and eventually improving overall economy, right? But they are not a private business. They are created as a utility. In one sense, highways are a utility that all of us can leverage. There may be a utility fee, like a toll that you pay for the road, but nevertheless, it's kept. There is no differentiated pricing. It's the same toll whether you drive an Audi car or a Benz car or a Maruti car. You pay that utility fee and you leverage the highway. But how you use it for your own businesses, for your own pleasure trip, family trips, depends on what you do on that utility. So typically, public utilities are created for both economic opportunities as well as sustainable livelihood, living, like public parks and public libraries and so on.
It meets some public goal that the government has identified.
Yeah. Societal, so the larger societal goal, either in economic terms or even living conditions terms. These are the sort of two things they come across. Yeah.
So now the big question which arises
that is digital public infrastructure.
Yeah. So the same analogy kind of applies in the digital world when you create an infrastructure of a similar kind, and it is called
digital public infrastructure. And by the way, world's largest digital public infrastructure is the internet itself. And it's not a website. Internet is not a website. Internet itself, it's a combination of protocols, which are nothing but standards, digital technology standards, combined with few gateways, domain resolution server, and DNS server, and all that thing. It's hosted across the world, so that you can browse the internet, right? And all of us. Then, what do you use internet itself? It depends on what you use. You can use it for advertising your product, economic, or learning something on YouTube or whatever you want to do. And then people build innovation on top of it. It's important to understand people create typical layers of innovation on top of such digital public infrastructure. Back home, while internet is, everybody knows, another example is telecom network. Telecom network is a classic digital public infrastructure that is a set of regulations, set of standards, so that an Airtel phone, you can call from an Airtel phone, and you might be on a Jio phone, or somebody may be on a Vodafone, or you might be on across the country or across countries. We can still pick up the phone, and there is a standard way to dial the number, do voice calling and SMS and so on. So there's a set of standards combined with a set of regulations and allowing a set of operators to create this grid, telecom grid together. So the underlying capability enabling such networks to come is the public infrastructure part of it. And then private companies create better, if Airtel does a better job than Jio, or Jio does better job than Airtel, they can acquire more customers and make more money and all that thing. But there is some regulations behind it, the regulations and standards behind it. These are good examples. And then, of course, then we can talk about why Aadhar and UPI and all that thing. How do they belong to that category? But globally, these are very well known. Internet is well known. Telecom networks are well known.
Now Aadhar is also very well known.
In India, of course, yeah.
And UPI, of course, is also, even in last 7 years, it's kind of become very well known. Most people have, I think they don't necessarily classify Aadhar and UPI as DPGs or DPI, but they have interacted with both these products on a daily, weekly basis.
Yeah.
So there is an interface that 1.3 billion people have had with these two products. So can you help us understand the different sectors in which DPGs, DPI currently exist in, and how do they interact with each other?
Okay, yeah. So while the words DPGs and DPIs are sometimes interchangeably used, sometimes not, they're not that well defined. DPIs are reasonably well defined now. They are public infrastructure, digital infrastructure that countries tend to lay. So we spoke about digital public infrastructure, and we defined that to understand quite like physical infrastructure, public infrastructure, like highways and parks and so on. Digital infrastructure, we talked about internet and telecom. But I just want to take a minute to define digital public goods. And digital public goods, DPGs, although there is no very well defined definition, maybe I'll take a crack at the definition. Definition is that digital public goods are in the building blocks or the components that are freely available, that allows the country to build their own digital public infrastructure. So countries want to do is to create their own public infrastructure, digital public infrastructure, to be able to do so. If they start everything from scratch, it takes very costly, it takes a lot of time. So we are saying that if open source components are available freely, such as standards and software and best practices and policy templates, these are all available as a kit, then they form the digital public goods, so that every country can build their own digital public infrastructure faster and cheaper.
Give us an example.
Okay, good. Okay.
Use UPI as an example to tell us the difference.
Yeah. So I'll use Aadhar and UPI so that we have two examples. Always two examples are always better than one. So Aadhar, when we did Aadhar, Aadhar is a digital public infrastructure because it is an infrastructure for our own country. Other countries can't use Aadhar. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's our own Aadhar, right? Now, seeing the success of Aadhar, many countries also wanted to go build their own foundation, digital identity programs, and said, we will also want to build it. But they asked the question, but you had all these technologies, you had the best guys, you had funding, you had software, you built it from scratch, and you kept, even with all that thing, you kept the cost to less than 70, 80 rupees per person. It is amazing how you guys pulled it off. We wish we had access to some of that so that we can build our own Aadhar, our own versions of Aadhar in our country, right? So when we looked at that, obviously we are now, as part of the digital diplomacy, there is an open source project called Mossip, actually. It's hosted under IIT Bangalore. Mossip is an open source software to help other countries build their own Aadhar. Think of that way. And MoSIP, hence MoSIP is an example of a digital public good, which is out there, freely available, but it's not an infrastructure yet. Somebody has to take it and put it, like Morocco doing currently. Morocco has gone live, Sri Lanka is doing, Philippines is doing. They are taking MoSIP as a digital public good, which is free, open source.
So they're basically
building their own versions of Aadhar.
Yeah. So basically, they're taking a software module, they're taking a protocol, or they're building software building blocks from MoSIP, and they are building it their own other version of Aadhar in their own countries. That's what MoSIP is doing for them. So, Dr. Verma, MoSIP basically is like a library of sorts, which has different book or different software products, which people can borrow and build their own DPIs, so to say. So, like in a public library,
build their own Aadhar.
Yeah, or Aadhar. They can build Aadhar. Yeah. So, like in a public library, anybody can come in, borrow, build, and then. But in this case, they don't have to return it back.
No,
because it's open source, so they can use it. It becomes their own ownership, and they maintain it. How many countries and what is the impact of MoSIP in building identity platform in the world?
MoSIP, I think currently, again, I may not be perfectly correct. MoSIP.io, MoSIP.io is the website. I think 5 or 6 countries are live or pretty much live with that. As I know, there are at least 15, 20 countries in the pipeline.
How many?
15 or 20 countries additional. So MoSIP has done a fantastic job in helping other countries build their own digital identity system. But MoSIP alone is only software. So I want to talk about a few other DPGs as part of our digital. Now India has taken G20 presidency. So as part of that, Aadhar authority is also offering know-how, knowledge, policy templates, other templates as free through the Ministry of External Affairs to other countries, saying our learning and our knowledge is also packaged and offered to the other countries, so that software and knowledge is available and they can secure their funding. I heard India is also keen to fund few projects as well, especially in Africa and so on. So there might be also country as a country may be also offering funds, but there are enough funds. Funds are never really the issue. A lot of times the execution that matters.
Execution is the challenge.
yeah, correct. Yeah, and in the case of example in the UPI, just to close it out, in the UPI, National Payment Corporation of India, who built UPI network in the country as a digital public infrastructure, is also offering the UPI protocol, what is called UPI specification, open UPI standards and protocols, along with our Beam software and UPI Switch software freely to all countries. They have offered that to all the central banks across the world to say UPI is available as a digital public good and without charging, in the sense that they are free to use DPI, build their own UPI network. And why is it our interest to do that? Threefold, right? One, India always has been a knowledge sharing partner to many parts of the world. And we continue to believe as a philosophy that we should help. If we are building it, whatever we are building it should be available to other world to build their own sovereign networks, for themselves. Second advantage is that we feel Indians are everywhere. Indians are traveling, Indian tourists are traveling, Indian businessmen are traveling, people are coming to India. So payment being a very critical, payment has no geography, border, right? So it has to go across. So we believe if UPI is used everywhere, interoperability of payments and ability for Indians to pay outside when we go, or remittance coming into India, where Indians earning outside can send money through UPI can happen. So that is the second interest India has. And the third interest is that if UPI goes, a lot of our startups also can go, because when UPI based network is created, let's say in a country one, another country, let's say in Dubai or somewhere else, they're trying. A lot of our startups who are providing technology and application apps can also go global, and which is a good thing. Our entrepreneurs can go global along with UPI. So we feel there are 3 reasons why we want to do UPI globalization.
So Very interesting, and thank you for putting that into context. So you mentioned about the fact that the digital 20 track in G20, which is basically enabling this going forward, and the fact that UPI is being increasingly being adopted as a standard by other countries.
Yeah.
Parallelly, there is the e-rupee and CBDC which is happening, and these two trends are coming together technologically because I believe they will have the same interfaces and same open source protocols which will enable them to work with each other. Is this the so-called tipping point for Indian fintech to use the DPGs and CBDC to go global? How do you see this panning out?
If we execute, opportunity is there. Opportunity is very, very clear. That if UPI gets adopted as a instant real-time payment protocol and real-time payment system in many parts of the world, cross-border payments, both outgoing and remittances can happen.
Which is currently part of the big banking system.
Big bank, big bank, and also expensive, slow, expensive also. Sending $5 from US to, let's say somebody in Canada wants to give somebody in Punjab, a birthday to a nephew or a niece, $10. Sending $10 costs $10. So I mean, does it make any sense to send at $10? It's so expensive and it's slow. It takes a lot of paper. It's just inconvenient.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there is a time has come for a global real-time payment networks to emerge, but it can't be one dominated by one company, or it can't be dominated by one country. It should be seen quite similar to telecom network, where regulators exist in every country, but they all have adopted the common GSM standard, and hence, and each country has their own regulation, and each country and many companies, and nothing stopping from Airtel to go to Africa like they have gone, or Jio to go to another country, just like any other business would do. But in addition to that, every country should feel their own sovereign control and sovereign. Otherwise, it can't be a company-owned business. So the UPI should be seen same way. We should look at a global UPI consortium of sorts, where every country gets their own independence to do their own thing. But if each country does their own thing using common standard, suddenly they are all connectable, like internet. It become a finternet. And when we become financial internet, then next step would be to have our startups and entrepreneurs play on a global playground rather than just domestic playground.
So let's spend a moment on the finternet. How does the financial internet basically come together? So there is the technology component, which you said is the UPI stack or the UPI interface. There is a regulatory component on top of it, which is currently controlled by the central banks across the world. So as you know, the Bank of International Settlement is putting together norms for CBDCs to work, at least on the wholesale banking side, with each other. And then there is basically below the technology stack, there's the execution part of it, which is where the fintechs would play. They would onboard customers, they would onboard merchants, they would use remittance between an Indian or a Chinese, or maybe not a Chinese,
and provide a lot more value-added services such as bill payments and so on.
So this so-called global stack or finternet that you see emerging, which are the blocks which are currently there and which are the blocks which are under development? And can you give us a little macro view?
Interestingly, we feel all the blocks are in place. All three blocks are in place, as you said. Regulatory readiness. That means every regulator, every country, there's no single country that doesn't want a real-time payment network, right? Internally, for themselves. Because the cards have taken us to some shape. Now it's about mobile money, mobile interoperability, QR code-based payments, payments becoming pervasive into your connected car and connected devices and Alexa. You can talk to Amazon Alexa and make that payment, voice-based payments. It's going to be everywhere. It should be everywhere. Ability to pay should be seamless and easy and secure. And that part, readiness, the regulatory readiness and intent is very clear. UPI has shown, and there are some other efforts like PIX in Brazil and few other countries have done as well. But there are enough proofs that an open payment network based on an open protocol and standards can truly thrive, like UPI. from no transaction to 7 billion transaction nearly last month is not a joke. It shows the entire ecosystem, banking, wallets, and startups and tech service providers, and have come together to make that network come alive in one sense, right? So it is that's specifications and technology exists. That's the second one. Regulatory intent and readiness exists. Technology exists. Third, startups who can provide apps, software development kits, tools to fast track the adoption. So the startup, what their fast startups do is that country opening a network. Imagine opening a telecom network, but there is no telecom, there is no phone, there is nothing. Is as good as a dead telecom network. So payment network also needs startups and banks to be tech ready. And that tech readiness also exists because each of these countries, at least India has done it, Brazil has done it, few other countries have done it. We have very vibrant fintech ecosystem across the world. So all three are ready. What is not yet ready, which I think BIS and should RBI can take leadership as part of G20, and definitely we should bring is to bringing people together. Like the way telecom networks came together to say, it's not enough for creating custom, phone networks in the country. If we somehow enable global communication across humans, right, in the telecom.
So the regulatory readiness is there, the technology stack is there. So, and I'm sure the fintechs are thirsting for exercising this opportunity. What is actually needed to bring this together now? Where do you see the gap?
I think it's not a gap. I think it's bound to happen. I'm hopeful it will happen. Quite like in the world of telecom, there should be maybe BIS with RBI or a couple of countries, couple of regulators who have done it successfully, along with BIS, can supercharge during the G20 year the conversation of a need for an interoperable global real-time payment network, right? And then make it happen. So it is
global real-time
payment
system.
Correct. And
real time is the most important part.
Real time is the most important. It's
and
not like 3
source.
days later.
Yeah.
See, what the tech is open source already. I think we should be open. But laying that interoperable payment network is as important as creating a communication network across humans in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It will certainly ease the, I think it will have a huge impact on global trade per se. One of our estimates says that the cost of remittance or the cost of foreign exchange itself is 3 to 8% of the cost of transaction. So some transactions are not viable, as you pointed out. Small transactions are not viable because the cost of conversion of foreign exchange is so high. And that is actually absorbed not by the foreign banks, by global banks, which jumping one from other to finally land up in the consumer's wallet. So if you have this real-time global payment system, which is open source, so it is not owned by a single entity, it's owned by, like the internet, it is owned by everybody.
Yeah.
And it works because it runs on a protocol that is standardized and it's in open source. So that is, I think that's a great encapsulation of what the digital 20 track possibly should focus on. It should.
Absolutely. And 2020, we are already 2023. There is no reason why we should be doing it.
Yeah. So coming to another, all these DPGs have fundamentally changed the way that public policy is being implemented, And some say, the detractors say that it is moved the center of gravity away from legislation or laws to standards and protocols. So the software engineer is now not just making public policy, he is actually running public policy. What is your thoughts on this?
That's a bad setup for sure. I mean, it cannot be one actor shifting that decision to the next actor. So you can't go from a policymaker blanket to an engineer. I think that's really a bad setup anyway. But I think that's not what's happening. What's happening in India is a combining of techno-legal, policy, regulatory coming together of that. What was missing traditionally is the engineers or the technologists never participated in policy making, and policy has to be digital is no more a separate thing. it's in life. Everybody's life is affected every minute by digital. And give another decade, 2 more decades, we are going to be immersed in a life. Society is going to be digital. When society is digital, the conversation ought to include technologists as early itself. So technologists, policymakers, legal experts, and of course, societal actors like, civil society and so on, coming together to create early discussions so that it is a well thought out and safe technology, what's called a technology for good approach that needs to get done. But so what I'm seeing here in India with the digital India push, the fundamental idea that technologies can sit in the same room as the policymaker from day one. Otherwise, you would say, I'll make the policy, then I'll throw it across the wall. You just write the code. No, what do you have to do? But designing tech and policy together, I think has been India's success, frankly speaking. Aadhar is not without policy. UPI is not without policy. DigiLocker is not without policy. ONDC is not without policy. Significant policy and regulatory thinking and legal thinking is going on behind it. But good thing is that technologies have been now embedded in this conversation, and India has somehow serendipitously, nicely seemed to have navigated this well so far. So let's see how it goes. But it cannot be outsourcing to technologies either. That's a pretty bad idea, okay? Even as a technologist, I would say, no, we should be making policy alone. There's no chance.
Now, we spoke about the fintech space or the payment space and the identity space. But there are several other places, education, healthcare, logistics. All these spaces have their own individual India stack equivalent emerging. So just walk us through these verticals one by one, maybe healthcare first.
So, we can maybe close out the finance part quickly, because finance was not just payments. So payments is now moving to generally what we call open banking, open saving, insurance. So I think there is significant effort thinking in terms of access to savings products and mutual fund. And we have done a brilliant job in India, allowing CIPP investment. And Zerodha's CEO has clearly acknowledged that they all could do their innovation because the underlying regulatory and technology stacks exist, right? The readiness exists to attract the next 200 million people or 300 million people to be able to do that. So we are doing savings, lending, and insurance. I think those three areas are going to be disrupted. Lending being the first one, big one. Savings, I think SEBI has done a brilliant job, and SEBI has done a good job in getting CIPP investments going really well. They will continue to do a push for that. But lending is big. So watch out this year for a good push in micro lending, small value, small tenure, but high volume lending rather than, only the big guys getting it, right? So which has been our, sort of bane. And then insurance, the new insurance IRDA chairman is very tech savvy. He's pushing for open networks in insurance products, discovery and access, because insurance is not a natural thing for Indians. We don't buy insurance. Two-wheelers don't renew their insurance. They rather pay fine, because I think it is not a well understood system. So I think protecting social protection of their own lives, because healthcare, I'll come back to healthcare. Healthcare is being one of the biggest reasons why people go to debt trap, right? So insurance and all that thing is a very key part of that coverage. And insurance doesn't have to be purely from government alone. Government can top it up for people who can't afford, but even individuals should be able to top it up, or their own employers should be able to top it up, and so on. So there's some significant good thinking in insurance. So that's on the fin side, which is somewhat expected because they're ahead of the curve, digitization. Then the next big one is health and wellness. If the society is unhealthy and health and wellness is, we have an economic doom on our way, right? In another 2 decades, if we have all sick, young, a lot of people with tremendous lifestyle diseases, it's already seen, it's already quite obvious that Indians are fast going to a pretty bad scene. So, but I do also see youngsters working out and doing well. So hopefully India will look at wellness before treatment and so on. Sickness comes, later for many reasons. But so health and wellness is a vertical. We believe digital, using the digital technologies can immensely increase the main three objectives: the affordability of care. That means my ability to afford care. How do you create digital to use, reduce cost and make it really affordable care, affordance to care, right? The second point is access to care. Our primary care system is really broken. Primary care, if you look at it, access to primary care is broken because old style physical hospitals with actual doctors in every village is almost impossible. So how can we create digital? How can we use digital smartly to create access to care? That's the second vertical. One is affordability of care. Second is access to care. And third is very, very important as a society is the observability of the health system.
Observability or regulation of healthcare.
Regulation has to happen for execution. To execute this intent, these are the three objectives in one sense, right? What we want to do is these three: make sure everybody has access to care, make sure people they can afford the care. Having a hospital next to me, but it costs me like 2 lakh rupees, is as good as not having a hospital near me, right? So affordability and access is important, but we also are quite flying blind. As India, we don't know what kind of sickness is spreading, what kind of diseases are spreading, who is doing what kind of surgeries. We have no data. And lack of data, and you are a policymaker, you understand this, lack of data is horrendous for a country of our scale to do any smart planning or create programs around awareness programs, healthcare programs, interventions, inventory planning, or any other intervention planning for that matter, right? If you don't know, you can't solve. Knowing is the first step to solve. So I think that is another key important. So we believe we must ensure digital is used to in a privacy protecting, in a careful manner. These three have to come. And for the first two, affordability, we have PMJ is a great starting point, which is the largest insurance in the world. But even then, some of us, personal opinion, we believe government cannot keep paying PMJ insurance forever because healthcare costs will keep on spiraling like in the US. Because insurance, you keep paying kind of situation, right? So in the sense, it's very important that we look at wellness and we also allow individual and market contributions and societal contributions to your care. So we are looking at PMJ. Imagine you have a digital health wallet into which not only government is putting some money, maybe state is also putting, maybe a civil society is putting, some NGO is putting some money for you if you are a poor person working in that area.
Explain to me how this digital health wallet connects to affordability. And is this actually a DPG of sort, or is this something that...
What we have done is that the digital, as part of Ayushman Digital Health Mission, there is a careful work on the health insurance part of it. And currently, only the central government and state governments have, as part of the insurance wallet, if I sign up for Ayushman Bharat, if I am eligible, I would get a central government support 5,500,000 rupees per family, per year. That's the coverage. And many of the states are topping it up as well. So some of the states have their own health scheme.
Yeah.
But some states have their independent health scheme, which is which is siloed, which is not connected to the same wallet. So as an individual, I have some 3-4 different. If I'm a poor person, I have 3-4 different Ayushman Bharat card with maybe national branding, some local state branded state insurance. Then I have some NGO or my employer. I may be a gig. I may be working as a security guard or some other place, and my employer may be giving. That's another one. So these are not unified. So we have an intent. We hope to see that our insurance scheme get unified so that I have a combined wallet size of 8 lakh or whatever, or whatever. Instead of saying, I don't know why all these cards, who will accept these cards differently? Some hospital accept only this one, some hospital accept only that one. We have to unify. We cannot make the life of that individual or the family hell because of political differences or different schemes. So while branding can continue, because national branding, Tamil Nadu branding, West Bengal branding and all has to happen. And nothing you can do. Technology can create something like a DigiLocker, insurance locker into which everything comes to me. And I can present it in a uniform manner to a hospital. And hospital doesn't have to say, oh, what is coming from here. So there are insurance markup language, real-time insurance authorization API, and then insurance claims API being built as part of that, so that everybody can adopt the same thing, whether it's a private insurance, state insurance, or central insurance, so that I, as an individual, don't have to get harassed on different cards and different coverage and lack of coverage and all that mess. So we are unifying that access.
So this unification is happening at the IRDA level, or this unification is happening at
a combination, both a combination of IRDA and under the ABDM initiative, with the National Health Authority leading the charge.
Okay.
Because it's a health alone. I was talking about health alone. IRDA has to deal with all kinds of insurance, general insurance and everything else, right? So and they are collaborating. They are collaborating on the health side. Both of them are collaborating because one is a regulator, the other one is a health,
yeah. So the National Health Authority will basically own this
They own the definition of, it's like UPI. They own what the specifications are, what the regulations are, and what are the compliance, so that whether it's Ola buying private insurance to their driver, or whether somebody at state government is giving, or an NGO is doing some insurance, they will, for me as an individual, they will all be one unified way to access it, unified way to know the balance, unified way to know what is covered, and unified way to use it in the hospital or on the health facility.
So okay. So this is one
multi-year game. Yeah.
So this is at the consumer end.
Consumer end. Yeah.
Is there anything happening at the hospital or the doctor's end, so that healthcare records could be exchanged, or there was talk about a healthcare exchange, HIMS or something that.
No, so it's not HMI again. I think India is very interestingly taking a standard-based network approach, rather than we are taking a standard-based network approach rather than everything will be in some government portal and all that thing, because it's privacy questions, everyday security questions, all that come about. So we don't want a centralized system. That's not what we are after. We are after a unified system. That means it can be decentralized. But as long as every hospital knows what to do, right? What do I do with the digital records? How do I onboard you as a patient? How do I accept your insurance? How do I give back your records back to you? And how do I make payments to you, or whatever, right? So what we are defining as part of ABDM is a set of standards. ABDM is nothing but a set of standards powered by underlying what's called registries and open specification, that every hospital, like Apollo network, can implement their own hospital management system. Because why should government give some software to Apollo? That's the last thing we want to do. Apollo can build their own tech, nothing wrong. Let the tech industry help them. But when they implement it, they all speak the same language, which is the common specification. So that you and I feel like whether I go to Apollo and next visit was, I was in Delhi, I'm going to AIMS. The AIMS doctor get to see my health record.
Just contrast this approach with what UK has done with NHS and what US did, say, 15 years back with HIPAA.
Yeah.
So UK actually built the whole system, and some of our Indian companies were involved in building that system.
Yeah. And so I think the difference is, say, UK NHS is a centralized approach, and also to do with some of the European countries. healthcare is free, completely taken care by the government, right? So government is the healthcare provider in one sense, in European countries. America, on the other hand, is a completely private run, sort of more capitalistic market, right? So what they had to do was to create regulations around data sharing and regulations, what's called a blue button initiative. Obama's blue button initiative was to give the data back to the consumer. They were not giving the data back to the consumer in the hospitals in the US. So they had to bring out regulations around it. They had to bring out regulations about data protection, which is HIPAA. HIPAA compliance was mandated to make sure that hospitals who are keeping all these records can't sell the records, use it without. And now with GDPR in Europe and our own data protection bill coming in, data protection is a larger topic anyway. HIPAA was ahead of the curve. In one sense, HIPAA was ahead of the curve. Now with the data protection, personal data itself will be very carefully treated and protected, and the right to know, right to be forgotten, right to access and share, all that.
We are building this interface layer and the storage of this thing, that we are building in India as a DPG, DPI layer, correct?
DPI layer,
healthcare.
Correct, yeah.
While
and it is under the ABDM, and hospitals, private or public hospital, will implement those specifications and comply to the regulations so that we all get a uniform experience.
So, I mean, to put this into context, whether I am in Apollo or I am in Medanta, the interface of the patient record is on a common standard and common protocol. So all the fields, all the information is standardized. The exchange is standardized. So it can move from Apollo to Medanta. But
with your
Apollo
consent,
may have
only
a
with your
SAP
consent.
system, on Medanta may run its own customized testing, but that doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
So the API is open source API, and the customer benefit, he can go to any hospital without worrying about without carrying his personal healthcare records so to say, in a file or in a.
Yeah, correct. And the DPI, what you call DPI, is nothing but this set of standards and policies that enable. There is very little software in that sense. So sometimes people think DPI means some software platform. Not necessarily. We can do a great job with DPI if we can even define the standards and give regulations around it, and market implements it. No problem at all.
Yeah. So, but I mean, when you say standards, these standards are written in English, but they're codified in software. So it helps.
Codified software. Yeah.
So that's an important distinction in that sense. Standards have always been there, but the difference is that now they're digital in nature.
They're digitally implementable. And by the way, so moving on to the education and skilling, very similar stories are happening. Diksha, for example, in the school education, or National Academic Depository and Academic Bank of Credits as part of higher education, where and the new education policy itself, NEP. Is very forward-looking. We are all genuinely hoping and supporting the implementations of that, because implementation is where everything, the rubber hits the road. It gets hard for education. It's not going to be easy at all for India. But not attempting is not right. So I think government is definitely attempting to shake up the education skilling system from a very linear, old-style, one unidirectional lecturing, remembering, and sort of just reproducing kind of world to a non-linear. I'll explain the non-linear, application-oriented, practice-oriented learning environment. And the non-linearity comes from the fact that today, for example, if a child decides that I took ITI after 10, there is no coming back to engineering streams or MTech streams because you're done.
So where is the role for and which organization are playing that role in the education space?
There's sort of Ministry of Education, both school education vertical as well as higher education vertical, both are under Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Skilling and Entrepreneurship Development, MSCE, which is the skilling. But thankfully, both have the same minister, by the way. So it's very interesting that we have only one minister to deal with both ministries and 3 secretaries. So there is significant effort. And the first attempt was to create the digital blueprint for unifying across skilling, because child is a child, whether I go in Anganwadi to school, to high school, to college or ITI or college, I mean, you can't have three different systems and completely broken systems. So NEP necessitates a unified approach. So there was an attempt last year, and last year it was got published, a digital education architectural blueprint called NDEAR, NDEAR, National Digital Education Architecture. That's what it stands for. I'm very sure they'll name something else, some more interesting names, but
Yeah,
for now,
NDR
it's
kind
called
of really
NDEAR.
doesn't endear itself to.
Yeah. So ndr.gov.in tells you about how education and skilling industry, the
So
whole
how
regulator.
has NDR borrowed or learned from other DPGs and
Which is, yeah. So this is also surprising. Again, I think we have a good set of bureaucrats at the top. I mean, like a 80-20 rule, I would presume there is a really good set of people, few people, and we had some very, very good ones in skilling and education in the last couple of years, and they were very, very clear that it's not some RFP to some large tech vendor to say what should we do digital education. They will push their product or their it's not, you can't ask Google how to do digital education. We have to make up our own mind. So they created this cross domain, well, it's high school education, and skill, plus industry experts and plus civil society experts and education experts to create a multiple working groups to bring all that together to what's called NDEAR. NDEAR brought a lot of that work together, and of course, the good thing about having this cross expertise group is that they were also very clear. And the good thing about government, again, bureaucrats, is that they always like to refer to presidencies. Presidencies are important for them because who wants to be the first one attempting some adventurous stuff, right? So good thing is that we also want UPI jaisa humko bhi chahiye type. So we want something like UPI in education skilling. We want something like DigiLocker. So I think good thing was that there was a natural readiness to say, let us leverage what we have built, the India stack and the learning from it, and build on top of that rather than trying to create something fresh. So I think that was natural because I think it was less risk, frankly.
So are there any protocols which have been easier to migrate from those worlds to NDR?
Yeah, so I think, for example, we have one example we are saying the DigiLocker effort of credentialing or digitally verifiable credentialing. We used it in COVID. We reused it fully in COVID. Certificate became India's DIVOC open source software, and the COVID became the standard across the world. 6 other countries have using it, same standard and software. So we did a good job in giving 1 billion people 2 shots with QR digitally verifiable certificate. So we are using what's called DigiLocker learning into health, and we are doing DigiLocker learning into academic. So the academic National Academic Depository and Academic Bank of Credits, which is the credit transfer, are all being converted to a digitally verifiable QR coded certificate in DigiLocker. So that means in my personal locker, I'm going to earn academic credits and academic certificates and so on in a very uniform manner. Why is it important? Because that allows me to get a better job, better opportunities, and better scholarship and so on going forward. So I think there is significant.
What is this credit locker or wallet or?
It is integrated to DigiLocker. The scheme is known as Academic Bank of Credit, ABC.
I know Academic Bank of Credit. Oh, okay. So okay.
That is what is integrated. Now, in addition to one more example, is that we were saying skilling system, especially skilling and higher education, is quite fragmented because a lot of private institutions, everybody is doing it. Discovery of job, discovery of internship opportunities. Today, if you want, our children want internship, or our nephew or niece want internship, there is no easy way. You ask your friends, is there any internship? In the world of digital, when I can discover any product on ONDC or discover information on the internet, why can't I find internship opportunities, scholarship opportunities that is potentially I can avail in a more systematic manner rather than untrusted Google searches or fake WhatsApp news or whatever, right? So what we are trying to do is to apply the ONDC same protocol, what's called Bekn protocol. It's an open source protocol. Which is used for ONDC, which is also used for mobility initiative in Kerala. Now it can be also used for skilling and discovery, job discovery, and so on. It's also used for healthcare, for telemedicine, UHI, that is part of the discovering a doctor or discovering a lab nearby. Today, it is not a trusted way to discover that. It is on the internet search only.
So give us a little background about Bekn, and you've already told us that it is being used in healthcare, it is being used in education, and explain to a lay listener what does Bekn protocol actually mean. And
It's very important. Maybe I'll take the example of a marriage broker. Everybody should know. I think, what do they do? They connect people who want something to people who have something, right? So I want a groom, I want a bride, and the other person says, I also want a groom, I also want a bride, and the broker is connected. Someone in the middle is actually connecting. And how do they do that? They actually keep track of information from both sides and say, oh, I know, right? Similarly, I'll explain, people should know Uber or Ola or Zomato. What do? They bring hotels on one side, people who are food providers or taxi providers on one side, and consumers on the other side who wants a ride. So I want a taxi, and the taxi guy is saying, yeah, I have a taxi. Old days, how did we do? We stood in the road or called whoever I know, 1 or 2 phone numbers we know. But Uber changed that, Zomato changed, Discovery. But the problem with that model is that one intermediary, what's called a digital intermediary, become very powerful. Like imagine there is only one marriage broker. Then, and only through that person you can find, right? You wouldn't like that situation.
Monopolization of the platform, or the
so-called monopolization.
Marketplace becoming the both the buyer and the seller.
Correct. So one of the things that the world over discussion is a more internet-like approach, where internet connected browser to website using HTTP. You type that HTTP on the browser. No, that is a protocol, right?
Yeah.
For everybody to understand, they would all have typed HTTPS. So, that's a protocol. Similarly, Bekn protocol is a protocol that allows buyer platform. That means any app to implement consumer side, discovery, and any platform on the other side to discover the selling side, seller side language. Both don't have to be on the same platform. So a taxi union in Kochi, for example, has their own software. And on the other side, Paytm, I can book today. Paytm is joining Kochi Mobility Network, or Yatri. There's another app called Yatri. That app can find any taxi unions without one central system. So basically, the two-sided market player is being broken into one-sided market player, but that can only happen if both can talk the same language. Otherwise, you can't discover it. No, that language is called a protocol in technology terms, and that protocol is created as an open source public good, digital public good. That's Bekn.
And tell us your role and where all Bekn is now embedded.
Yeah. So Bekn was an idea, Nandan Nilekani and some of us in Bangalore, this is what we do. We keep thinking about what could be the next disruption. What are the patterns we are seeing? We are seeing huge monopoly, drivers hating their own company. Nobody puts on AC these days. They say, I don't make any money at all. The commissions have gone up so much that I don't earn enough, and so on, right? So we have been thinking about this for a while. And we see that in the US, we see that in Europe, everywhere we see. This is not an Indian problem.
No, platformization of both the economies and shifting of control from the seller or the buyer to the platform is now a reality across multiple sectors.
Across globe.
Yeah, globally.
Yeah. Globally. So we have been thinking about this since 2017, because we did UPI, and UPI gave us the confidence that a protocol-driven open network can actually work. And so we were thinking, why only in payment? Why not in taxi booking? Why not? What is the big deal? Booking taxi is a very well understood language. I want a taxi. I want this kind of taxi. I want from here to this, there. And and the taxi guy can say, yes, I'm available. I'm going to charge you 250 rupees. Are you okay? Then okay, and make the payment. It can't be complex for a technologist, but it's complex to bring it alive, definitely. But so we started thinking, and we started this foundation called, now it's The name of the foundation is FIDE, F-I-D-E, and FIDE.org. Nandan and I, and we have a CEO, Sujit, who is the co-founder as well. And then, but we said it can't be just by 2-3 people because this is not our. We should get industry experts to participate because taxi guys know how to do, mobility, food guys know how to do, logistics guys like Dunzos of the world knows how to. What's the complexity of shipping something from here to there, right? So what we did is that unlike many of the other systems, this foundation itself is only like 4 people. Okay, this irrelevant, in one sense, irrelevant foundation. We were only a catalyst. Think of that. We are frankly only a catalyst to this idea to put out a draft idea architecture. But we had a very, very, very interesting large community, including Dunzos and Shadowfax and many companies joined in the open source community. They're all in the various working groups. There is a logistics working group. There's a mobility working group. There is Kirana commerce working group. There is hospitality working group. There's health working group. There is skilling and job discovery working group. Companies like Better Place and MyGate and all these guys are all sitting there saying that it is a good thing to do because each company by themselves cannot solve 1 billion people's problem. But if all of us can expand like UPI or expand our market share and bring a large number of people beyond the first 50 million people or 5 crore people or 10 crore people, we have to get to 50 crore people using it. We have to come together. So there are a few thousand people in the open source community who is developing the Bekn protocol today. It's amazing. But if people get inspired by the idea, I think they rally behind it. I think that's what I've seen.
So, I mean, what would be now the total size of people who are now engaged with, at least on the developer side, in the open source DPG world?
I would say, at least from India, definitely a dedicated set of 2,500, 3,000 people, probably. People are committed, are in the community, actively participating across all these DPI, DPG efforts. Various foundations, Extra Foundation where I works on education skilling. There are health related source foundations, and of course, folks at our India Stack and iSpirit team is working on that. Many volunteers, open source enthusiasts in one sense, participating in this. But how does it get rolled out? It has to be not a technology play. It has to be a techno, policy, legal, market play. Because there have to be market incentives, there have to be market readiness, there have to be policy readiness. So it takes time, but we have patience, I think. So we will work. We have this is a multi-decade journey for a country to go towards that. So very large community, and globally there is even bigger, the big community. Yeah.
But I mean, like in certain areas, I mean, like India is taking the lead.
Of course,
in this space. If you go back, say 20 years back, the whole open source community was largely US centric and European centric, and it was largely focused on operating systems. And of course, it then evolved into ERPs and others. But it's surprising, it never kind of evolved into a public good, though it was a public good in the sense.
Few things came out.
It was a public good, but it was not solving public policy problems. It was still solving user problem or corporate level problems.
Yeah, correct.
Now suddenly this open source world has changed, and it's morphed into a DPG world, in that sense.
Yeah,
it's the same principle, same underlying people, people like you and others. You have the same mindset as Richard or Linus Torvald has, that some things need to be not monopolized.
Yeah.
So just to kind of end this conversation, what do you see going forward? What are the areas where you see these products kind of develop or taking more traction?
So you are right. India has definitely been leading by example, by creating digital public infrastructure, proving it at scale, a billion people scale, we can actually make transformation happen, inclusion happen, and create equity, in the world as much as possible. And it's a journey. There is no end to it. Recently, somebody asked, so did we achieve our outcomes? Outcomes are like milestones. It doesn't mean we will solve all the societal challenges. Problems will continue to come. and we have to continue to solve them. It's always going to be a long journey. But India has definitely taken, and India's work is also very well acknowledged in the world. And because of that, many countries across the world is now talking DPG story. So, which is a good thing because that creates a global movement to create public infrastructure, digital public infrastructure in a highly digital world. So we can now what we can expect is that we have much to do in education, skilling, healthcare and wellness. We are only beginning. Commerce, ONDC work and so on is only beginning. We are at least 4-5 years away before, like UPI, we can say, great. Now at least we have achieved some acceptance and scale in the society. But beyond that, I think we'll continue to create communication. For example, today, messaging is all walled gardens. WhatsApp, iMessage, nobody interoperates between them. And Jack Dorsey and some of these ex-Twitter guys are starting to globally talk about interoperable chat systems and so on. So I think this is a global problem. It's not an India problem, but definitely for India, given the India's scale and diversity and a rapidly moving digitally and aspirational young India, we must be intentional about this and not serendipity, somehow something will happen. Our political leadership and bureaucratic leadership should be very, very intentional about this, which I can see happening, continue to be so, and so that we can push the boundaries of equitable economy and inclusive economy to happen. There is so much to do. Education, healthcare, we are barely scratching the surface, frankly. So, but we seem to have a method to this madness. We seem to have confidence in that we can do something like UPI and Aadhar and so on. Confidence gives new projects, right? Societal confidence. Everybody is bubbly and they believe in it. That belief is key. I think India is definitely believing it. So I think it's about execution, and many people have to come together to make that happen. So looking forward to coming years.
Yeah. Thank you. Brilliant exposition of the DPG world and the impact that it is happening, not just in India, but across the world. Thank you for those wonderful ideas. And thank you for all your effort in building these things, more than just...
Always a team effort. I just happen to be one of the
people like you who have done, I think, human service to not just the country, but just in terms of thinking, thinking has progressed beyond. People have started thinking a little bigger. People have started talking about population scale, society scale, problem solving in a different way. Thank you, Pramod. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.